Okay, so yeah, no, what I'm gonna talk about is actually fits very nicely into what Al just started with, because um, what we said to you, I think Sam sent out an email saying we're going to talk about the subtleties and the nuances and the what ifs, but more importantly, I want to start right from the very, very beginning. So there's some stuff that we generally don't have time to teach in the trainings, and it ends up not really not being central to what we talk about. And so I'd actually like to start with the consult. So, you guys, some of you are in positions where you're doing consults with clients in order to try to get your clients. And depending on how they come to you, I mean, I'm just looking at who's here, and we have lots of different ways that people are attracting clients and lots of different things that they're attracting clients to, right? So some of you have a client base already. Some of you are just newly out getting clients and everything else. But because we're NLP practitioners, so just about everyone here. So I just want to start by saying most of us, I think, probably have, right out in front, an NLP coach or, neurolinguistic practitioner, or however you've brought it into your practice. It's actually part of what you put out there. Some of you don't, though, right? Some of you are going to sort of use NLP in the back end, like you already have a thing that you do. So you're going to continue to call yourselves, a psychotherapist, or you're going to call yourselves a coach or call yourselves whatever. And unbeknownst in the background, potentially something that you actually, advertise or not, you have NLP skills along with all of the other skills that you use. And I know a bunch of you here have a lot of other things that you do, right? So you have different approaches and things that you use. And so I'm just going to start it by speaking to those who do get addressed with the questions about NLP, because, I would say that, again, so some of us are really, really lucky, and we are mostly referral based. Those of you that are, I would say Alan and I, for the most part, when people come to us, they're specifically looking for an NLP coach, right? So they know that we're NLP coaches. If they had any real strong reaction against NLP, they wouldn't be in our office to begin with. But not always. Every once in a while, we get people, we're both, because we have master's degrees, we're able to get ourselves on Psychology Today, which is a really good place for sourcing clients. And so sometimes we do get people that didn't really read that part. They just sort of like skipped, they liked the picture and then they saw a few things and contacted us. Oh, cool. That's awesome, Tanya. So Tanya's on as well. Awesome. So sometimes people don't really know. And so every once in a while, we do get people in our office as well who don't know anything about NLP. And then, of course, we have to explain it to them. But in this consult process, no matter who you're dealing with, no matter how much they know about NLP or don't know about NLP, you're going to run into objections, right? Except for the clients who have signed up, just blindly signed up. But most of us still have to make an impression and, do a bit of communication and just education really about what it is, and let the client know what we're going to be able to do. So I wanted to address some of the things, because I know I get asked by clients, and sometimes it comes up in class and in other places where we speak about just what we do. So having done, hundreds, more than hundreds of consults with people, here's the things that I think are really important. So I know that we have page 10. So those of you that have done NLP Prac with us, I don't know if the class right now has done it yet or not, but page 10 is often what people advise NLP practitioners to use as the consult. So if you were to go through Tad James' School of NLP, they would say to you, the page 10 is a perfect consult. So there's that approach. And I'm sure it works really well. I'm sure that a lot of people probably get a lot of clients that way. And that's asking them what they want, really getting the client focused on what they want, and really demonstrating to them through that process that they're going to need help getting it. Right. So you kind of point out that by the end of page 10, what you realize is like, yeah, I've got a really strong desire for this thing, and I really need some help getting there. And that's the intention of it. And that can be good. I don't do that though. I don't find that has been successful for me personally. And or not that it hasn't been successful. I shouldn't even say that. It's just that I feel like I have another way of doing it that is more successful. And so I feel like there are some things that are really, really important to do with the client, where, before they're your client, but when you're just talking to somebody about what you do. And this, by the way, may not even be just in like the official consult that somebody signed up, but just if you're talking to somebody, right? So sometimes we get into these conversations and you realize all of a sudden that you're standing with a potential client, even though it's not an official consult, it's somebody who fits that niche of somebody you could help, right? So in those conversations, I long ago discovered that I was terrible at convincing people to do anything or to buy anything. It's just like, it's so not me. It doesn't fit my personality. It doesn't really line up with my values. I don't like convincing people to do anything. It's not, I just don't like it. I don't like it in my personal life. I don't like it in my professional life. I don't like being a convincer of other people's thoughts. And what I do really like to do, however, because I'm by no means, like timid in my opinions, what I do really like to do is to create curiosity. And so I just sort of defaulted, not with a really well thought out strategy, but just because I started defaulting into my natural self. And truly what was fascinating to me was the possibilities of NLP, right? Of what we could do. Like when I was blown away, when I first encountered NLP and realized just like how life-changing it could be, it left me with this sort of like awe about the reality, like the possibilities. And that's what I tend to share with people. And what I realized was happening, the reason why I think I was getting so many people who were signing up seemingly with almost no effort, right? I would sit down and basically have a conversation with them. And all of a sudden Al was saying to me, hey, Tara, you've got like a 90% success rate in terms of, clients signing up. And I was like, that's great, because I meet all these lovely people and have fantastic conversations. But what we realized was happening was that when someone is left with curiosity, it is so much more powerful than feeling like they just got convinced to invest in something. And at the end of the day, the curiosity on my part is really, really genuinely piqued because I'm legitimately interested in their problem. I'm legitimately interested in hearing about like, what are you up against? What's your challenge? And so once I sort of got the art of this down, some of the most important things was for me to understand that I was using this, that it was a two-way thing, right? So I'm sure this is not new for anybody, but it really is. It's not just about me trying to get this client. It's about spending half an hour together and me also deciding if this is somebody that I can work with, right? Because chances are I will, but it could turn out that this is someone that I'm going to refer out to somebody that I think is more qualified or more specifically, going to be a better match for them. Or it may just be someone that I decide I can't work with. Either my values are not in alignment with them, or I think it's too medical, like it's too, like if somebody has a diagnosis, so somebody is like really, really, really heavily medicated, or if they have a diagnosis that is just like they've had psychotic episodes, or if they've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, or like something that is just, it's so far beyond our scope to work there. Obviously we wouldn't. But also if you get the sense of that, like I would say, if you get the sense that this person is just not grounded, like, and I'm not talking about messed up with a problem, because messed up with a problem is our bread and butter, right? That's what we like, is people that are like messed up with problems, because that's when we know we can actually genuinely come in and help them so much. But if it's somebody that is just like delusional, like I have done consults with some people and been, referred some people where their grasp on reality is not there, right? They just don't have a sense of like themselves. These are people where like they're lying to you right away. Like they're just saying things that are not really true, and so their connection to reality is not there. And those people are not, I wouldn't advise working with those people, because you'll never get anywhere. They'll pretend you got somewhere, but you won't. Anyway, so you want to make sure that you are filtering out the people that you can't help, obviously, but the ones that you can. So once you've decided, by the way, guys, I'm not going to sit here and like lecture for an hour. So if you have any questions at all as I'm speaking, I will not be offended if you like write them in the chat or just like stop me and ask. Yeah. So once you decide that it, or as you discover that it's somebody you want to work with, this is what I think is most important. I think it's most important that you ask the questions that are most natural to you, that you actually want to know. So let go of any sense of script, like any idea of, questions that you should, any prescriptive thing. And if you just ask questions that you are like, honestly, the things in your head that you're curious about, like how, like what happened? Like how did you end up in this situation? And just like, you are in a role with people where they expect you to take they're not expecting you to be like a polite friend, or to like not ask weird questions and all that kind of stuff. They're there because they want you to be somebody different in their life, right? They're expecting you to step into this role of like, I'm going to ask you different questions, hopefully. And so whatever, as long as it's not offensive in any way, ask the questions that are most true to what you want to know. And that is like the best way to get the conversation going. And then as soon as I get just a sense of like what's going on, I will generally say to people, and I immediately, just for the record, immediately pick up when people are nervous. Just remove any expectation from them whatsoever. So if I find that I'm with somebody who's really feeling nervous about, having to open up, or just like nervous about the whole process or unsure, whatever, I am not going to try and get them to start talking to me before they feel comfortable. I'll just start talking. I'll just start like going into like, why don't we start this way? I'm going to explain to you what I do. I always check, do you know a lot about NLP? Do you know nothing about NLP? Whatever I'll explain. And then I'll jump into like, okay, what do you know about the unconscious mind? And so if you are taking notes on this, the things that I think are most important to tell them are, you should make the differentiation between talk therapy and what you do. And I say, Sue, your cat's killing me. Love it. But you should make the differentiation between talk therapy and what you do, and make sure that you're doing it in the most respectful way. Because most people probably have been to a talk therapist and they may have had a good experience with it. And even if they didn't have a good experience with it, you don't want to be, start out by like being negative about anything, right? And so, but that distinction is so important, I find, to get out of the way right in the beginning. So you just say to them, I don't know if you've done talk therapy in the past, or if you haven't, or whatever, but I just want to point out that the work that you do with me is really different from that. And I make a point of saying, I think that talk therapy is really valuable sometimes. There are some times when, it's really, really good to talk to somebody to be validated, right? When you need validation, you just need somebody to talk to hear your story. You got to say stuff out loud because you don't have anyone else to talk to. Thank goodness that there are therapists there to talk to you, or to tell you that you're not crazy, right? Like to just validate your opinion. And even if you just want to figure things out, for some people, it's really important to them to just understand, right? Like to sort of pull things apart and analyze them and get a better understanding of like why they are, doing what they're doing, that kind of stuff. And a psychotherapist can be really good for that. It can be really, really good information that way.
Hey, T.
Yeah.
Let me jump in as well. Those of you who've done prac on the 7th day, on the coaching day, on the last day, we do a really in-depth breakthrough of how NLP is different than. So how it's different than traditional therapy, how it's different than education, how coaching is different than, and we go through a list of about 7 or other differentiators of professions. So right now, Tara's talking in a clinical context, in a coaching role, but that same differentiator, if you're in a high-performance sports role, if you're coaching high-performance sports teams and you're using NLP, you're coaching at a different level than if you were a traditional coach. And if you're in a corporate setting, if you're working with an individual migrating up through the system, you're doing differently. You're using a different toolbox than a traditional coach would use. And I will suggest to you, if you're doing business performance coaching, like on a whole corporation, you're doing different coaching than somebody who comes from a different background. And I think what the message here is that the differentiators, you can focus on things that just produce phenomenal results and differentiate you from your competition as an NLP, as having NLP as part of your toolbox. I'm thinking of Paul, Mike Kaufman, perhaps Nicole, if once I get to know your avatar better, right? Catherine. So just keep that in mind. I think it's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And then let them know that the single most important thing that they need to understand about what neurolinguistic programming is that so what I will have said to them is, it's really important to have these other ways of, having coaches and therapists and whatever else. What we do with NLP, if you don't want to, I'm just jumping back to connect what I said. So what I would be saying is, if you need to talk to somebody, therapist is great. If you want to understand things, that's great. But if you really, really want to change your response to things, if you want to have a different emotional response to things, if you want to actually be able to have a different set of thoughts and a different reaction, then you've got to work with something that's dealing with the unconscious mind. And I think it is so important for people to hear this message right away, because it's the most, you're immediately making suggestions that this is going to be different from anything else that they've done before. And it's really, really, really important for the person to be thinking about it that way as they hear the rest of your message, right? And so at that point, you would likely, I always explain to them what the unconscious mind is, because wherever they've come from, unless you're actually dealing with somebody that's like trained in NLP or in, something very similar, the chances are their understanding of what the unconscious mind is different from the way that we use it, right? The way that we differently understand it. And so I will always bring in a metaphor, and I apologize if I've, you guys have heard, some of you have heard me say this before, but some of the really good metaphors that allow people to recognize the truth of what you're saying. So I'll just give you an example. One that I find is really, really helpful for people to get it, like to finally understand what you're talking about, is that one that you've probably heard me say about, like, it's really easy for us to understand that biologically our unconscious mind is running all sorts of stuff automatically, And so when I say to somebody, can you explain to me how you grow your hair? And they'll generally, of course, say, like, I have no idea, because not one of us here knows exactly like which proteins have to bind with which, whatever, and for what process, and how many of the trillion billion things have to happen in order for hair to grow. And yet we know we're all doing it, right? We're all in the process of growing hair. And it's just you in there. It's just you. You're the one inside this body. It's your brain that is putting the stuff together to grow your hair. And so we could, right? Everyone would agree that I could actually bring you into a course and I could teach you everything that there is to know about hair growing, so that you know exactly what, protons and things and atoms and whatever have to go together to do it. And if I taught you all that to the point where you could actually write the essay on how to grow hair. Now, if I said to you, okay, so now you understand how your hair is grown. Now go ahead and stop growing your hair. It's unlikely you'd be able to do that, right? Just by understanding. And that is exactly what it's like when somebody says, hey, listen, you don't have to be anxious about this. There's no reason to be anxious about this. And you do all the talking around like why you don't need to be anxious or insecure or, feeling nervous or lack of confidence or whatever. So just go ahead, now that you understand that you shouldn't have to feel anxiety about this, just go ahead and stop that now. And you have about as much access to stopping that anxiety as you do growing your hair. It doesn't matter how much you understand it, how much you get it and understand like where it came from and like, oh, it's because my mom was this and my dad was this and that's all the reasons. It still doesn't give you access to be able to go. And that is exactly how our emotions are generated, right? They're down there and they're generated in this process of stuff that we don't have access to. And so when I give that metaphor to the client, like right out of the gate, it's so every human being that I have ever met can relate to that, right? Like you can relate to that experience of like, yeah, like that, what it feels like to know that you don't need to feel a certain way or you shouldn't feel a certain way. And yet you have absolutely no idea like no ability to not feel that way, right? And so I haven't met anyone yet who doesn't like hear that and realize like, right, okay. And it's really beautiful to me. It really, because you're letting the person know that it's not their fault. And I'm not talking about cause and effect here. I'm not saying you're letting somebody like be at effect of their problem. I'm just saying that you're taking that like shame away, that sense of like, you're just not smart enough to, so if you were smarter, or if you understood this better, or if you had gone to a better counselor or a better therapist or whatever, that you would have got through this problem. You're saying to them, like, you can't do it. Like, it's just not accessible. And I'll follow it later and make sure that I say, people have been able to change, of course, right? Organically through all sorts of, different ways. Some people find prayer and God and church or running or love or like whatever. Like there's a million ways that people do actually change, but NLP gives us that capacity to do it on purpose, right? Intentionally, we're able to go into those processes and you just can't do it otherwise. So I think if you can get a similar, like a metaphor, use that one, by all means, go ahead and take that one, or find any similar metaphor. I think that gives your client, for me, the experience that I have with my clients is it just like sort of relaxes them into like, oh, okay, we're in a safe place with someone who isn't going to like, I don't know. And I don't want to be indicating that other therapists are less or whatever, but I am really surprised at how many people have had experiences with, because it's all talk, because I don't believe that it is possible for someone to actually stay objective, right? So I know that as soon as I get into the talking part of my own sessions, I immediately have my own biases to deal with, right? If I'm just bringing them up above the timeline, I have no bias. I'm truly able to be objective. When I'm just doing submodality shifts, right? When I'm just doing core transformation work or wholeness work or something where I'm just like facilitating their change, I truly can do that. And I really, really believe that I am being objective and I'm not being judgmental. I'm not bringing my own, my own map in or anything. But as soon as I get into like the reframing, I try my best. I think I'm fairly good at, trying to stay as objective as I can and make sure that I'm not bringing my own biases in, but I'm sure I do. I mean, it's almost impossible to believe that I don't, right? And I think that is probably for someone who's been in other types of therapy where it's really dependent on the practitioner or the therapist to be the one that is like guiding and making those decisions. The client often feels that, right? I know I have felt that. I had loads of therapy before I found this. And it was often like, you kind of knew that like, when you admitted that like, you're telling your stories, whatever your stories are, and you're wondering, right? Like, so I think that there's something just really, really, really beautiful about the way that we can present it right out of the gate as something that is going to be different and totally, completely objective, and that we're going to be able to go in and make change in a way that hasn't before. Yeah.
I think, Tara, related and sort of tying this back to how Alan kicked us off with regard to pricing and what you charge and that sort of thing. I know when I started working with you with our first breakthrough, I remember having a conversation with so I'm a social worker, another social worker friend of mine who's also getting his PhD or got his PhD. And I was saying, and I told him how much it costs. And he was like, whoa, like he sort of was taken aback, right? Mm-hmm. Which is laughable now, but nonetheless, he was sort of taken aback. And then he was telling me about his experience. And he was like, I was in psychoanalysis for like 5 years. I was like, do the math, dude. Like, yeah. You totally paid more than I did. And my problem is solved now. Like, yeah. And I don't think your problem is, I love you, but I don't think your problem is solved. So, I think that can kind of come into the conversation too, if as necessary, especially if people have done talk therapy and still feel
absolutely stuck. I think, yeah, thanks you, Catherine. That's such an important point because we do. So I usually stay to the end at this point, but I do mention that and make it really, again, imperative that they understand that this is going to be a process that has a beginning and a middle and an end. And when it ends, and I'll say to them, we're going to go 3 months. this process is going to take us 3 months, intense 1 month, and then like 2 months of just helping you navigate through life after, because life gets weird when you have big shifts or whatever, right? Of just check-ins. And then I'll say to them, you know, some people will sort of stay on for another couple of months because they just really get it, that they can change so many things. They kind of get excited about it and we start changing lots of stuff. And so I always say to my client right in that first consult, but I don't see anyone longer than 6 months, ever, as a rule, because if that happens, I am so likely to become a crutch. And I'm not in the business of having clients who become crutches and, have to use me as a crutch, right? I don't want my clients calling me unable to sort out their own stuff. So we make sure I make sure that that's really, really, really clear, that they'll get all the support that they need, and then it will be over. So I just want to go back to, where I was. So basically what I'll do is I'll do that sort of opening to make sure, and then I'll explain the unconscious mind a little bit. And then what I have said to them, I've probably missed this, is I've always said to them, and this is, you know, the one little hokey little selling thing that I do, which I didn't even realize I did until Ellen pointed it out to me that I do it. But I always say to them, you know, I'll tell you about, and I'll do this with my hands, I'll tell you about what I do. And I'm going to just explain to you the process and how it works. And then if you could tell me about what you're up against, what your challenge is right now, and then we'll just see if they fit together. And if they do, then we'll go forward from there. So I didn't even really realize initially that I was like basically bringing their problem and me together, and then like visually. But I think it also is something that's really important to, like, that nuance of just like, I'm going to tell you what I've got. You know, I'm going to show you my hand and you're going to show me yours a little bit. And then we're going to see if it's a match, and only then are we going to move forward. And there's a sense of, like, I don't know, equality that I think is often not there, right? Where like the patient is the patient and the person of authority is the person of authority, as opposed to like, let's both just put our stuff on the table and let's see if it's going to work out, right? Let's see if this is a match. And I mean it, like, I really mean it, you know, like, I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm not just like doing this because it is a clever way to get people to sign on. It's because I really believe, you know, as NLP practitioners, that is, we've got to trust our clients as much as they've got to trust us, right?
Tara, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that you said what you do with your problem and what I do, and if there's a match. Well, I have started to sort of watching on my own shoulder every once in a while. I am constantly talking about the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. And I'll say to the client, so beautiful how I see that it's coming together and you're doing that. And I never, like, that's okay to do that. Cause I'm saying, cause it's, you know, you're working together in it, and it allows you to be way more in tune to what's going on, so that you can make, cause it was in, cause I found like I keep doing it and it's like, okay.
Yeah. And it's so real, right? Because it really is what we're doing. We're not doing anything to anyone. We really are coming together. Good night, Adam. Thank you for coming. I think he's gone. Yeah. So then objections. So if you want to bring up any objections that you've got, I'm going to list the ones that I know that, you know, either coaches have brought to me. I want to start just with the actual,
Just before you go to objections, in NLP, we always say it the way we want it. But when you're working with clients, most people, when they're in the engagement process,
you guys hear him?
What Tara was saying, most people are asking questions that should be answered yes. So when we study Milton Erickson, we talked about tag questions. You know, this is something that interests you, is it not? That's a yes answer question. Sometimes if you're perceptive of your clients, no answer questions work better. So would it be unreasonable to think that this might work for you? It's a no answer. Because often we're so attuned now to being sold all the time, to being boxed into a corner. Yes, 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 yes. And really all you want them to do is actually consider if this is okay for them. So I would encourage you to master both asking yes questions with tag questions in the Erickson methodology, but also start utilizing no answer questions. So would it be unreasonable to think that this might be beneficial? No, it's not unreasonable at all, right? And so you're going to apply, and that applies to a different part of the brain, right? So as Tara said, when you get that point where you're asking them where she does her fit in, and it is, she does have a 90% close rate when she gets on a consultation. And I observed it closely as an NLP modeler. Where is the magic? And it was that magic in setting up the two gears and letting the client pull the gears together and say, that's a fit, right? So, and the question would be, is it unreasonable to think that what I do might fit with your problem, that I might be able to help you? No, it's not unreasonable at all. Okay, so would you like to hear more? Now I went from a no question to a yes question. Sorry, and then I can start dealing with objections. Thanks, T.
So can I just, from a sales point of view, frequently when you're, rather than asking yes and no questions, because to your point, Alan, sometimes folks start to feel like they're being manipulated.
Yeah.
It's asking about, and I don't know if this works or not, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah.
Because then you can also get at that duality that people are frequently coming with, that yes but, or the yes no, or no yes. Like I'm fascinated. Sometimes I catch myself saying that, where someone will say something, I'll go no, yes, and then I'll answer a thing. And I now with NLP, I'm starting to, why the heck have I got a no yes thing going on? But so
yeah, that's
would that getting at that stuff?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And as an extension of that, watch Joe Dispenza talk to an audience. Joe is selling to 1,000 people in a room. He's selling, make no bones about it. He's selling his theories on epigenetics. He's selling the possibility of being more than we are. And he uses some very beautiful techniques. Are you with me still? Right? And that gives the person to say, no, you lost me, right? Are you with me still? And does that make sense? Or then could you agree then? Based on everything we've talked about, could you agree then that this might be possible? And now you're moving the person from where they were in a stuck state to possibility. And if you want to watch a master at selling to 1,000 people at a time, watch Dispenza. He's brilliant. And he uses all NLP style. I'm not saying he knows NLP very well. He knows hypnosis immensely well. And he's using our style of language. So, and adapt it. Sorry, T.
No, that's okay. But I'm going to add my little nuance here, Catherine, to that. That is where I depart from this entirely. So I agree 100%. If Alan if that's your style of doing things, then master that stuff, because it clearly works, right? In terms of sales and all that stuff. I do the exact opposite, like on purpose to the nth degree. I don't ask my the person I'm with, I don't ask them for anything. I don't ask them for a yes. I don't ask them for a no. To the point where, and guys, this is like where I'm sharing very personally what I do, right? I'm sharing this with you because it is what I do. I'm not sharing this as like, I'm not selling you this as a sure way to make sales and everything. And I'm not contradicting what Alan said. I think Alan's way of doing it's great. I don't like it. I don't like setting things up that way, because I don't like, for me personally, there's a falseness to it, right? And so I actually avoid the client having to say anything. And this is a personal preference, because I don't like having to answer. I don't like when I'm put on the spot having to say yes or no to something, because I'm going to be polite 100% of the time. I'm going to say what I think that they want to hear. If I'm in an engagement like this, I will. If somebody says to me, like, do you think that's possible? In my head, I could be like, not a fucking flying chance. Is that fucking possible? And I'm going to smile at them and I'm going to be like, yeah, I do. I do think that's possible. That's me. That's how I roll. I'm not proud of it.
Guys. I need to jump in.
Wait, okay.
No. The person talking to you right now will buy a timeshare condominium at every presentation she goes to, okay? So just understand, Tara is the spark on the planet. We go in, we'll book a timeshare in Mexico, right? Where we know we're going to get presented to all the way down to Mexico on the airplane. Okay, so we're not buying, right? It's not until we get in the presentation. We're half an hour in. She said, this would be really good for us. We could learn to use this in every presentation we've gone to. So just be aware of that.
Yeah.
If you've got something to sell, phone Tara.
Yeah, it's true. and then I get really angry after. I get really mad because now I've bought something that I'm so pissed off that I bought, that like I was in like fantasy heaven land because I'm so gullible. Like I am just so, like, if they tell me to imagine myself happy there, I'm there and I'm happy and I'm buying it because I'm so happy there. But that will last, I don't know, an hour or 12 hours or 24 hours before I'm like, what? And now I'm mad, and I'm mad at the salesperson, and I'm mad at Alan, and I'm mad at everybody. So out of, this is something that I refuse to do to other people because I just feel like, anyway, so again, I do the opposite, where I just leave everything open-ended. Even if I ask a question, I don't even wait for them to respond, really. Like I might end up saying something like, I'm sure you've tried stuff like this before. I'm sure that I'm not sure if you've been to counselors or not been to counselors, but I know that like probably whatever your idea of this is different, right? Like I've asked a question in there, but I don't need them to feel like they have to answer me because I don't want them. It's true. Not only do I not want them to think that, but it is true that I don't want to play off their answer. I don't want to change my like pitch. I don't want to change the vibe of what I'm doing based on their answer. And I want them to understand that that's not where I'm going. Like that's not what I'm doing. And so for me, I end up just, I sort of present everything that I have to present in terms of what I'm able to do. They tell me their situation and I listen as long as they want to share or not. And I totally respect. Sometimes people will just say to me, I've had some really hard things happen and I just know I need to get my life on track. That's okay. That to me is.
If I could jump in again, Tara.
Yeah.
Instead of asking questions that require the client's response, like an affirmation that they agree with you, I ask a lot of questions, and I've heard Tara ask a lot of questions. We ask permission to explain things. Would it be okay if I explain this to you? Would it be okay if I demonstrated how this technique might help you in the future? Would it be okay? Would you be all right with? And now you're getting their agreement to keep moving forward. If they say, no, I don't want to hear it, then you at least know. And that actually builds rapport, right? You're connecting to what their thoughts are feeling in. So, a lot of salespeople ask questions literally to put you into a yes, yes, yes frame. We ask a lot of questions to build more rapport. If we're asking questions, we're asking permission, we're asking the rights to go ahead. And even my no answer question, would it be unreasonable then to talk to you about how this might work for you? No, it wouldn't be unreasonable at all. It's just that what I was suggesting there is a flip of the question rather than always asking yes questions. Ask a question that would be good, but ask permission for the things you want. And as Tara said, then they just open up, right? They put everything out on the table. I keep turning off my mic because I'm doing other work, guys, but I have one ear in the audience.
Okay. So then I make sure that I find out expectations. So I don't do it sort of overtly. I don't ask specifically what their expectation is or anything, but just sort of listen for it in terms of like as they're sharing. Because you want to make sure that you have, I usually just offer the limits of the expectation. So I give examples of what is not possible and I give examples of what absolutely is possible. And by doing that, again, without them having to like tell me what they want and then me being like, oh no, yeah, we don't do that. Or, or to get overzealous about like, oh yeah, no, that's exactly. When I tell them like, here's the type of stuff that NLP works brilliantly for, and that, I work with all the time and that works really well. And here's some stuff that doesn't work as well. Right. When people are, if it's couple counseling, like if what you're really looking for is somebody to like solve your marriage problems, I may not be the best person for you to work with because that isn't what I do. I'm not, and so, I'll just make sure that there's sort of like that I create and they can fit themselves in, like I just assume that they are smart enough and wise enough and clever enough to figure out whether or not they fit into what I have given them in terms of expectations for how it works and everything else. Okay, so I just want to mention so if you get objections, so lots of coaches, I would say in the first, and I don't know how this works, and I don't really know what I believe in in terms of like, there are people that believe that every single thing that happens in the world is your own projection, coming back at you, and at like literally to the nth degree, right? There's some people, and we've had lots of them on course, that really believe that like, if you trip on it's because you're projecting something, right? You're projecting your own accident proneness and everything else. And then there's people that pull back way into like, a much, much more conservative sort of like, well, yes, my perception obviously is affected by my filter, but the world still happens out there, right? I'm not living in like my own reality. So wherever you live on that spectrum, it doesn't really matter. But this is what I will tell you. I will tell you that in the first year that I did this, I probably got like, I don't know, every other one of my clients questioned the validity of NLP. Just like, well, I've heard terrible things. My husband looked it up on Wikipedia, and I've read that it's pseudoscience and it's a cult. And it's like, I just got this like clients who had read all the bad stuff about NLP, right? And I don't know what has changed or whatever. I don't get that anymore. I can't remember the last time that I had a client come to me who was saying like, I think that this is, or whatever, like just really, really questioning the validity of NLP. So whether that's my own projection or, whatever has happened, but I do find that a lot of new coaches, new NLP trained coaches run into people, they often come back to us and say, what do you do with all these people out there that think NLP is a crock of shit and it's bullshit and it's just, and so it seems to me that this does tend to happen, and I'm going to go out there and say it tends to happen when you're kind of expecting it to happen, when you're worried about it happening. So if you yourself are sitting there thinking like, oh, I hope this next client doesn't like question NLP or, ask me about whether it's a cult or a pseudoscience or whatever, I think that you do get more of it when that's happening. And I don't know how to explain it, and I don't want to go there, but I do think that's part of it. If it happens though, so if you are running into people who really question it, what I would really suggest, and we'll probably pop in here, but I think that you need to be so respectful of that, right? So respectful of the fact that they have maybe done their research, maybe not done their research, maybe been advised by somebody that they really respect, somebody that they really look up to or admire, has given them some sort of warning about this, or, like you really need to meet them where they're coming from in terms of respecting that, and make sure that you don't diminish it, right? Make sure you don't make it seem as though it's not something worth worrying about. And so I always just say to them, like, I get it. I think that it's a really, really valid question to be asking. I know what Wikipedia says. You guys probably, if you don't know, you should probably look it up, because it does tend to be one of the first places people go, and it's pretty scathing. And so if you sort of like allow it to be whatever it is, and don't deny it, right? Because if you deny it, to me, that just makes you sound defensive, and you do not want to come across defensive about what you do, right? And it will also diminish their concern. And so just if you just say to them, yeah, it makes sense, that there are a lot of people who have said a lot of things about this, and it's been really misunderstood, and it's also been used badly. To be perfectly honest, it's a powerful tool. It is a powerful, powerful, persuasive way of communicating. And some people in the past have used it, well, not in the past, in the present and past, have used it in ways where they've probably been very manipulative and used it, in dirty, rotten ways. However, we've taken this really powerful tool, and I always do the analogy of like, it's like a hammer, right? The hammer itself can be used for good or evil, but the hammer itself remains neutral. It's the intention that the person uses it with. And I absolutely, if you want to ask me a million questions, by all means, if you do have people, I don't I don't do this because I don't like that, but I do know that there are some people who would say, if you want to talk to any, I have a couple of previous clients, if you want to talk to them or anything like that, I don't go there. I just go into like, do all your research, do the research that you need to do. And I welcome it. And I don't need you to decide right here and now that you're all in. That's not important to me. What's important to me is if you trust enough to start the process, and just trust me, trust that I'm going to use this with the most integrity. And I am absolutely committed to helping you through your change. And it is really, really, really effective way of communicating with your unconscious mind. And then I explain to my client always in the consult, I'll always say to them, your unconscious mind is desperate to keep you alive and thriving. That's all it wants for you. And I go into the explanation. You've probably heard me say it, or I'll say it, like most of our brain, we still share with the lizard. Like we are really, really run. This machine is run by something that has not evolved very much at all. And then we have this very cool prefrontal cortex and a frontal cortex that is like newfangled. And that's what differentiates us from the animals. And that part is brand new, but most of us is still operating, like it used to, or like the lizard or the reptile or anything else. And those instincts, they just want to thrive and survive. That's all. Their whole intention, your brain is desperate. Your unconscious mind just wants for you to thrive. And I will with some clients. So here's where I start reading my clients. If they're like a highly intellectual client, who has a real interest in what's going on, I'm just following them to see, like, are they bored out of their mind right now? And they just want me to like tell them the price and, end this thing? Or are they really genuinely interested in what I'm sharing with them and are like kind of absorbed in it? And so if they aren't, I'll drop it there and, move on. But if they are, I'll go into like, your unconscious mind. I'll explain epigenetics. I'll say, we know now, we have people that have tested, that have taken, a cell and they've put it in a petri dish with negative emotions, negative hormones. And I'll explain lipidins thing and just say, when you put it in a petri dish and there is adrenaline and cortisol and all this stuff, that cell does not thrive. And when you take that exact same replicated cell, you drop it in a petri dish and you surround it with oxytocin and GABA and serotonin and all the happy hormones, that cell thrives. And we know this to be true. And so the back of your brain, this reptilian part of your brain, that is so much of it that's driving everything, it just wants for you to thrive. And when at a cellular level, when you have negative emotions, you're not thriving. And so your unconscious is desperate for you to do this. It's going to get on side, and it's only going to take positive suggestions. And so you always stay in control. And I don't do deep hypnosis. What we do is we just work in alignment with that unconscious mind to move into those positive suggestions. And I'll go there with someone who needs that information because they're either like highly AD or, they're just really interested now and curious about how it all works and all that kind of stuff. And I always give them permission to continue to ask questions. Like, it's okay. It's absolutely fine to ask questions throughout this thing. So
Tara says she doesn't do deep hypnosis, and I'm watching all of you fuckers in trance and going, yeah. So when Tara says, I don't, just delete that and put in, I do deep. But she does storytelling as trance. I'm a fan of Milton Erickson, right? And Richard Bandler. And so Tara just told you how she deals with it, but she ends up telling stories and metaphors, right? And you need to find metaphors that fit for you. Each of us have our own metaphors for why NLP is where it is. I have the good fortune of having spent 5 years researching NLP in the context of trauma. And the research is there. NLP's efficacy is documented in trauma, and that body of knowledge continues to grow. It's beyond refute. So I can produce scientific evidence, NLP versus cognitive behavioral therapy. 45% success rate, 80% recurrence. NLP, 92% success rate, no recurrence. EMDR, 65% success rate, 50% recurrence. NLP, 92% success rate, no recurrence. So if somebody wants to get into the science with me, that's cool. But the other thing is that there's a movement. And I say, it's unfortunate So I'll tell the story about the movement. If you're in Switzerland, you can get a counseling degree in NLP, NLPT, it's called NLP therapy. If you go into the UK School of Psychotherapy, NLP interventions are included, including Rewind, which is the trauma intervention. And here in the beautiful province of Ontario, under the Controlled Active Psychotherapy, NLP and Erickson hypnosis are now included in all 6 colleges: psychiatry, psychology, psychotherapy, nurse practitioners, nurses, and doctors. NLP and Erickson hypnosis are now part of their recognized therapies. And then I just move on. I just leave it. I don't even, there's no argument. I just move on. So that's one way. And then I tell stories. I tell the story about the discovery of the cure for ulcers, and how the two researchers, Dr. Warren and Dr. Marshall, in 1979-80, found the cure for 80% of all gastric ulcers. And it was antibiotics to heal E. pylori. And they started producing results. In every conference they went to, they got slashed. They got hacked. Because in 1980, the antacid, anti-ulcer industry was over $1 billion in 1980. They're up against $1 billion industry because they say, yeah, we can cure 80% of all ulcers in 7 days with an antibiotic. Nobody wanted to hear that. They thought they'd be the darlings of the medical industry. Well, gastroenterologists, the guys that operate, because if you didn't heal your ulcer in a certain requisite time, they used to cut you open and cut your ulcers out in surgery. And some of these surgeons were doing up to 25 procedures a week. Ulcers were rampant around the world. Look at the data. And it wasn't, so in 1985, Dr. Marshall actually infected himself with E. pylori. And when he had the full-blown symptoms of the ulcers, he treated himself with antibiotics. That became legendary in the field of research. He was the first researcher to ever poison himself because his beliefs were so strong and he couldn't get funded to do a human study. So he did a human study of one, himself. By 1994, the CDC in America had finally recognized what they're doing, and they put out a public statement 15 years after the discovery saying that, yes, indeed, ulcers were created by bacteria, E. pylori. And at that point in the mid-90s, so full 15 years after their discovery, antibiotics became the treatment of choice. And in 2003, Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren won Nobel Medicine Awards for their discovery 23 years earlier. And for 10 or 15 years, they were made a mockery of. But we now know today that they are absolutely on track. And Dr. Marshall, if you've ever seen the movie with Matt Damon, Contagion, there's one point where the female researcher is frustrated and she infects herself with the contagion, and then she injects herself with the vaccine that she's created, and she cures herself. And one of her co-workers says, "Oh, you pulled a Dr. Marshall." That's in direct reference to the Australian doctors. So I tell that story. I said, you know what? There's a lot. There's a lot of science that's credible and just isn't respected yet. And I just leave it again. I don't get into huge debates. Yes, T.
So what Al is telling you is really useful and important for trauma clients, right? So for clients who are really questioning about, like, does this trauma protocol work? Is this science, all that kind of stuff with what Alan does. So Alan teaches if you're doing a trauma protocol with somebody, and that science is really, really, really important. And that kind of story and that kind of metaphor is really important because the science is all there because of all that stuff. It doesn't suit what I do because I do much more, more healing journeys with people. Right? I'm not going in and doing the science brain surgeon work that Alan's doing. I'm doing something a little bit different. So it's useful.
Here we go. This comes to the Kanerva family feud. But I disagree. And I'll tell you why I disagree. I disagree because in the healing journey, what we know now, epigenetics, meditation, that our thoughts and feelings control our genetic expression, we will have all sorts of people come in and argue that, right?
Yeah, I know.
We're actually encouraging them to see the opportunity, see the richness of their possibilities. And they're arguing actually for their limitations, that epigenetics doesn't work or that NLP can't influence their genes. And I'm just demonstrating that lots of things we don't believe in today, 10 years from now, are fact. If you pick up any encyclopedia from the 1950s and read what was fact in the 1950s, it's frightening.
So do you want to hear a real good Kanerva back and forth here?
Okay,
You want another reason why I wouldn't say it to client? So I would say it in a training all day long. In a training, I would that to me is so important. In a consult, though, I don't want to make a person feel stupid for believing what they have believed. I wouldn't want to, like, if they do come in not knowing yet about this, I don't want to make them feel like small or stupid or less than, or like they're like I'm comparing them to the people that didn't believe, like, and I'm the smart scientist and they're the stupid sort of, person out there that doesn't know yet. So I would stay away from that in the consult with a one-on-one because of that. In a training, though, I would share that, or with a trauma client.
Gifted. I can deliver that message without making.
All right. But I would say that with someone who comes in with trauma, who's saying like, how can I know that this trauma protocol is going to work when other things, other people say other things work for PTSD or don't work for PTSD, right? Anyway, okay.
Just on that note,
if anybody wants to see the continuation of this argument, you can log in to 10 p.m. tonight.
I'll put a camera up in the house tonight. But here's the thing, I have all this science in my trauma world, but I'm up against a psychology and a psychiatry industry that tells the mainstream people that trauma is an injury that cannot or is impossible to heal.
Yeah.
I just healed an Olympic athlete who wasn't sleeping. She sleeps 10 hours a night. She was on drugs. She weaned herself. She went to the UAG to get cleared to write exams. And the psychiatrist at the University of Guelph said, not possible. You still have trauma. Here's more drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm up against every day, right? Every day.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, I felt good.
Okay. So in terms of like, to close that, if somebody has some real objections to the process, for me, again, talking about the nuances that I use would be to just really, really give them the opportunity to recognize that there's another way to see it, and then let them have their beliefs the way that their beliefs are, and let them come to a different. Usually what will happen is they'll start asking questions, right? And then I'm like more than happy, and I encourage them to ask as many questions as possible. And again, I really mean it. So when you're doing this stuff, just stay within what you really, really mean. Like when I say to somebody, I'm really happy to have you stay skeptical of this process. That's okay. It doesn't, oh, good night, Kate. You don't need to actually have somebody fully in belief of, all of NLP and exactly how it works and all that kind of stuff in order to have a really positive experience. I would say a lot of my clients, it's, halfway through the breakthrough when they start actually having the experience of like, oh my gosh, I got to admit to you, I didn't really, expect that this was going to work. And it really has. And not to say that like a lack of belief isn't something you want to pay attention to and try and resolve early through the process. But just that I don't think that there's anything wrong with really giving people room to the point, by the way, and to the point where I don't have a lot of a problem saying to somebody, I have had some people who are like, it's a lot of money for them. It's a big investment for them. They don't really know. They want to believe in this, they're trying to believe in this, but they probably have a whole lot of reasons why it's really tough for them to believe in this. And I will say to them at that point, if that's coming up in the consult, and I have no problem saying, we'll do a couple of sessions. You cannot expect miracles in the first session, the second session even. But if by the third session, this is not working for you, it's just not your cup of tea, then I will absolutely not like keep your money, like I will pay myself for my hours that I've put in. But I will return to you any money that you've paid, or, let them pay for those first 3 sessions and then pay the rest of the breakthrough fee when they choose to. That kind of faith, I think, just really demonstrates that you mean it, like that that you understand that you're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, right? What you're offering is something that you really genuinely believe is going to help them. And that if they end up deciding that it's not helpful, you're not in this to try and like trap them into the process or the money or anything else. And you got to be careful. You got to really pay attention to, you also don't want to be opening the door to letting them stay in disbelief, right? You don't want to be making any sort of suggestion that it's not going to work. But I find it almost always does the opposite. Almost always, by the time people, it just allows them to go in feeling very, very confident that they're with someone who is going to honor and respect their own process. And I ask for feedback, right? So I ask for, like, as we go through this, you're going to keep telling me, and I will suggest that, like, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that's going to surprise you. That's going to be amazing. And then you let me know. And if there's things that aren't, that aren't shifting or aren't moving, you let me know, and you've got to tell me, and then we'll just keep moving through it. And so to end the consult, I always, and if there's any other objections that you guys have run into, feel free to bring them up.
We, as NLP practitioners, you all have the skills to know a client's convincer strategy and how to elicit the convincer. If a person's uncertain and you understand that they have a convincer strategy of 3 for something positive, you can ask them, you can use meta model type questions, say, what specifically would have to happen for you to be convinced that this is right for you? We have beautiful language in NLP, and then that just opens up for them to have a conversation. You have meta model questions where you can chunk down to get to specificity with them. Then you have Milton model questions where you can move them back up to abstraction, back up to a higher thinking about what's possible, right? So when you use your Milton and your meta model questions, and you use your predicates and your rapport skills, this is pretty powerful 30 minutes. And we've talked a lot about the nuances that can happen at the 30 minutes. And I don't know if you saw the time, T, it's 8:18, but you have the skills to get right into the deep structure of what they need to know, right? And if you can provide it to them, great. And then and give them the time. As Tara said, the lack of urgency is such a confidence builder, right? If you're not urgent, if you don't need that next sale today, it creates a whole different atmosphere. That, it's kind of different than going to the brick to buy furniture where you have to buy now to get the lowest price, right? It's a whole different projection.
So on that note, I never even let anybody answer me in the consult. So I don't let people sign up or pay right then and there in the consult. I always say, so often, I will tell you that often, I'd say probably half the time I get people that are like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm in 100%. I'm doing this. Even in that case, I don't take a credit card number. I don't take a payment at that moment. I still say to them. So some people say that. Some people will say, I got to think about it or whatever else. But no matter what they've said, even if they say to me, great, I'm all in, and I'll say, perfect. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask me about it. And I'm going to send you the contract and take a look at it. And if you decide to do this, then go ahead and you can book yourself into my schedule. If you decide you have more questions, contact me. If anything else, just let me know. And then we get off. And I don't know. I can't even describe that one. I just feel like it's, I don't know. I feel like it really is important for people to go away and think about it. I really think that people, I can't remember the last time I had somebody sign up with me and then not go through with it, not pull out or anything. And I think it has a lot to do with that. I think it has a lot to do with just if you've been given that opportunity to just sleep on it, think on it, and then you decide to go for it, you're in, right? You're in, and you've made the decision yourself, not in the company of somebody who has asked for your yes. And then we're done. So
we have the good fortune too, as a company, that we're just big enough that we have a third person in the office, an admin assistant. And so when I get to that point with the contract, I say, when the client, as Tara says, I'm in, I say, great, I'm going to put you back in touch with Sam. She's our assistant. She takes care of all the registration, all the contracts, all the schedules, and all the payments. Would that be okay if I transfer you over to Sam? And they say yes, then I hand it over to Sam, because I never get into a discussion about price or anything at that point. I've already told them what the price is. They go to Sam. Sam just said, okay, how can I help you? When would you like to start? And she takes all their data and it's done. And now Sam becomes the point of contact for all administration for me, all the contract, everything. And now I'm free to take the next consultation or work with the next client. And it's a very clean handoff. And as Tara said, the clients, you know, if they get with Sam, they say, I want a week to think. She's fine. She understands that, right? And she books a time in, she'll call them in a week. Hi, you said a week ago, and she'll just carry it out. It's very simple. So if you have the facility to do that, if you have somebody you can refer the registration process to, great. If you're doing it yourself, as Tara said, send them the contract, let them fill it out, let them get back to you. We also use QuickBooks, so we can put a quick invoice in QuickBooks, it gets sent, and they can make their payment on QuickBooks when they choose, right? And that's giving them authority, that's giving them control. And again, when we're healing problems with people, so many people come to us with issues and they don't feel that they have any control in their life. So many people with the issues we face, not just trauma, but anxiety, depression, confusion, inability to move forward, they believe they have no voice, no say, and no control. What a beautiful thing to offer them, that in this massive transformative period in their life, you decide when it's right for you and how you want to start, and we'll make it work for you. And it's like, somebody's hearing me, somebody's seeing me, right? And they move forward.
Okay, let me just say two more things and then we'll stop. I don't know, what time are we supposed to stop? 8?
Oh, 7:50, Tara.
Oh my gosh.
I'm joking.
Okay. Catherine just said it's so opposite of what's usually sold. Yeah, this is why I'm sharing this with you, because it's so hilarious that it's just because I was just so absolutely rotten at sales that I gave up and did this, and then discovered like, oh, this is interesting.
Tara, you're not. You're the when you're being really, really good, when you're a great salesperson, you're not selling, you're understanding a problem, you're bringing insights and perspective, and you're allowing them to buy. And that's what you're doing. It's excellent. It's absolutely excellent.
And Tara, I'm not going to let you go on for a sec. Tara always says, I'm not a good salesperson. She worked in an organization that had 11 offices. They probably had 25 to 30 people selling. Tara was always the number 2 salesperson in the organization, much to the chagrin of the owner, who wanted Tara to do the hard sale, hard close, ask the questions, box the client in, get their check. The number 1 salesperson was always the same person, and they did the script, they did the sales. They hard closed, they sold more than Tara every month. Their dropout rate was higher than Tara's, and Tara's retention rate of clients was higher to them. The clients stayed longer, bought more services over time than the number 1 selling person. But yeah, so Tara says she's not a good salesperson. Catherine and I agree 100%. She's a brilliant salesperson. She'll never be the number 1 salesperson in an organization that's scripted and has, you get the client on the phone, you have to sell them on that call. There's no be-backs. She'll never be the number 1 salesperson in that environment. Over time, in a relationship sell, always a winner. Every time. There you go, baby. I just pitched you.
That was weird. Thank you. So I guess want to say that I think at the end of the day, that is the most important part, is that I do think that probably you could convince people, I could probably sell more if I did it differently. But I also feel like at the end of the day, because you love what you're doing, and I know everyone here on this call really loves what they're doing. I mean, you're here, you're doing it. We have, I don't know how many hundreds of people we have trained, and you guys are the ones that show up here. Like that says something. There's something about like just the kind of person that you are, who is seeking to learn and learn and learn and learn. And that, I think, is what comes across the most, is just like when I sit with in terms of the nuances and stuff, is that I am continually learning. And I feel like when I'm sitting with someone, every single word that comes out of my mouth is true. And it doesn't mean, so I was just I totally understand if you have to go, guys. Where I have failed before, where I have sometimes failed, and I will tell you that in the first sort of 2 years, I did have to pull back the expectations a little bit. The only time that I ended up with clients that weren't happy or that like didn't finish the process or whatever is when I had gotten too excited about what I could achieve. So I oversold, right? So I got into this like making it seem like it was too easy. Like because I was so high on the like unconscious part of this, I accidentally led people into believing that they wouldn't have to do any work on their part. So that's one of the real subtleties that I make sure that I have now learned to scale back is like, as much as I do want them to get really excited and understand, you know, the unconscious mind, and this will be different than other things and everything else, I also really emphasize that like, however, this isn't magic. And I always use the example and I'll say, you know, people come to me sometimes and because they see that I'm a hypnotherapist or they've heard things about NLP and they'll say to me like, okay, I need you to just make me, you know, not want to eat the cheeseburger anymore. And I always have to remind them that like, okay, I can make it a whole lot easier for you to not eat the cheeseburger anymore, but you still have to be making the decision, right? You still have to be taking action. And it's important that in that first piece, because you will get a certain percentage of clients or of like potential clients who, when you say that, are like, oh, really? I thought this was hypnosis, basically. Like, I thought you were just going to do magic on me. And you want to make sure that they decide themselves that they don't actually want to work with you if they're going to have to work for it. Right. So I think that's really that to me, since I have started doing that, like since I've made sure that that balance is really clear to my clients, that I will help them so much. But they're really, really going to have to do the work. I don't really get anyone, I don't get, you know, failures in that way anymore. And that's the piece that I had to figure out.
Tara,
and yeah.
Did you define yourself as a coach? How did you define yourself? You just said, you know, I will help you and you're going to be doing the work. But how did you define your role?
As a practitioner. So I was really clear to always call myself an NLP practitioner. I'm not crazy about the word coach. I don't know, just for me, I mean, I don't love it for me because I don't feel like I fit into a lot of the categories of coaching. Like when people think traditionally of like life coaches, I do really like the word practitioner because it fits me better. And so I always put myself out there as an NLP practitioner.
But how do you define what a practitioner does though, T, to the client?
Yeah, so if that's what you're asking, Sally, I just let them know that I'm going to guide them. We have big, like I make sure they understand the unconscious mind. I say to probably everyone I've ever talked to, I always say to them, you know, I don't know what you need because I've already done the explanation about the billion trillion things that go into, you know, generating an emotion and whatever. And I'll say to them, like, I don't know what you need to let go of anger. Nor does anybody with any number of PhDs know what you need for you to let go of anger, but your unconscious mind knows exactly what you need to let go of anger. And so that's what we trust. And so I am going to be the guide. I'm going to be the one who has the skill and the ability to guide you and to facilitate you into your unconscious mind so that you can let these things go. I'm going to be paying attention to what's working and what's not working. And that's where my skill is. And I'm like pretty boldly confident where I'll say like, I'm exceptionally good at what I do. I am a really, really good facilitator and I will pay so much attention to what is happening, but you're going to do all the work in there. And I'm just a guide because I don't know. I have absolutely no idea what you need to step into this dream.
Tara has said a powerful word 3 times now. I am a guide. I am a guide. I'm really good at what I do and I am a guide, and your unconscious mind knows what you need to do to heal whatever you need to heal. And I'm a guide and I'll take you there. That's, you know, I'm an NLP practitioner and I'm a guide. And you heard the congruence when she said it. If you're calibrating on physiology, tonality, and words, it was absolutely congruent when she said it. And the confidence, if you remember your intonation at the end of a sentence, I am a guide, it was moderately command level intonation. Like there was no question. If a client heard that, they're not going to question what the hell that means, or Tara's capability or confidence around it. That was, for those of you doing linguistic analysis here, that was a beautiful combination of words, tonality, and physiology with the right intonation at the end of the sentence. And it just happened extemporaneously.
And the other thing, when you were talking about piquing their curiosity, and you create their curiosity, and that's such a good thing. I never thought about that, but it just kind of pulls them in.
It pulls them in, and it's true, because Sally, I am legitimately curious about what is going to work with this person. Like, I love what I do. I love what I do. And I am surprised with every single client that I work with. Like, I'm not as good. Alan is better than me. I'm not very good at sitting down with someone and being like, oh, predictably, this person is going to need to do this and that. And like, I have no idea. And so when I say curiosity, it's like, I love NLP enough and the work that we do enough to get people really curious about what we do and how it works and all that stuff. And then I'm really curious about, like, I don't know. I have no idea what you need. I don't know. Like, I'll say to people, like, someone who comes for weight loss, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you're going to lose 100 pounds, or maybe you're going to fall in love with your body exactly the way it is. I have no idea. But you're going to be happy, or like, I don't know, maybe you're going to leave your husband and you're going to, go to India and find yourself on I don't know, or maybe you're going to fall in love with your husband again, newly. Maybe you're going to see yourself reflected back in a whole new way. And I'm never going to be involved in that. Like, that's not my decision to make, nor would I predict that now, but we're going to find out what you need, what you need to figure out. And that curiosity is so, if you don't have that, you have no business coaching. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't care, if to you, this is a done deal of like, I'm just going to do what I do and do it well and get them then to, in my books, you shouldn't be coaching anyway. Right. Like, it's so the curiosity, when you realize that that's all you're probably going to be able to do is just like show yourself even more. Right. And when you're curious about them and they're curious about you and you're curious together about like how this is going to work, it's works pretty well.
For you guys that don't know, Tad James passed away last week. And Tad had some beautiful sayings. One of Tad's sayings was, I'd rather be interested than interesting. Mm-hmm. He said, I'd rather be interested in others than be interesting. He also, it's on the top of page 10, one of the first questions you ask is you ask yourself, how is it possible that they don't have what they want now? When you're looking at the client, you're looking at them as magnificent. You're saying, how is it that they don't have what they want now? And it's all through his teaching, to be curious, to be interested. It's more important than to be interesting, right? And I think that's a profound, and as a guide, if you're an interested guide, if you're a curious guide, that's a pretty fun journey. And I like what Tara said about, I don't know where we're going to get to. Like, we always set goals with clients, right? But when you're in an unresourceful state and you set a goal, you're going to set a pretty unresourceful goal probably.
Or you just won't know how you're going to get to that goal. Like, we'll get there, but how? I don't know. By way of train.
If you've been carrying baggage for 5 or 10 or 15 years, what you want is highly skewed. When you're free of your debris, what do you want? Maybe you do want to go sit in an ashram in India. I don't know. It's not for us to say.
Mm-hmm. Lindy, you had a question, yeah?
Yeah. So being a young practitioner, not in age, but in months.
Every way, yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, like, I think for me, the issue is the client someone I can take on? Mm-hmm. Right. So even as I hear you, because I have this understanding and belief that I love people, I'm fantastic, I can help people, I'm interested in people, I have that, like, I can help you. And I see the work, the NLP work, I've seen it on myself. I see how incredible it is. So I just, in my mind, I'm like, so for me, the question is, for example, Tara, you started off saying, if someone has issues that are beyond you, you don't take them on. So I'm wondering if I am taking on people who have more issues than, I think I can handle. And so how do you gauge that? Because for example, I've taken on this young girl who has said that she has not been diagnosed with depression, but has had some catatonic states. And this is the one I was mentioning a few weeks ago, Alan, where she said, where she answered no to the question, will your unconscious mind want to release it? And I just find that, and she even at the beginning said, I love negativity. Like, I love it.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah, so we're going through the work, and she, even as we're doing the learning, she's like saying negative things in the learnings and saying, but I don't really believe this, as I'm telling, like, it's just, So we did some part integration, and just even with vulnerability, like the fact that when she did her homework, the fact that she cried in front of me was like this miracle, so I feel
How old is she, Lindy?
She's 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
So instead of solving the client problem here for a sec, Tara, if you chunk up to ask the bigger question we ask, when is my client my client, right? And I agree with you, Lindy. You come into that situation, you're good, and you know the toolbox you bring, right? And I've dared whoever you believe you can dare, God, creation, to throw me the fastball. Give me the fastball. Let me see if I can hit it, right? And I've got thrown the fastball, and I've hit it out of the park, and I've got thrown the fastball, and it was a swing and a miss. And we only start to learn when we swing and we miss. When you hit the ball every time, you're not learning. You have to swing and miss sometimes. And I don't think with this particular client, you're swinging and missing. I actually think you're hitting the ball, right? And then the other side is as NLP practitioners, I think we need to work on, enhance, and transform our own inner communication with our unconscious mind. We need to be present in the moment, listening to that inner voice in us. When I'm sitting curious with a client, I need to listen to my inner thoughts. I need to stop myself from racing to the conclusion of how I'm going to work with them in step 3. Boy, what I can do for them. I just need to sit in this moment and see. For me, I'm visual, but to see, to hear, to feel it inside, to hear that inner voice say, yeah, this is my client. And I've taken on some clients, even in the last 6 months, I took on a man who wasn't my client. And I talked myself into it, but my inner voice was saying, no, absolutely no, this is not your client. But my ego got in and said, no, this is well within my skill set, right? And the tools I used were within my skill set, but the client wasn't within my skill set. What they wanted, I couldn't give them. And so if I'd listened to my inner voice on that moment, I would not have signed that contract, right? So I think part of it is knowing your avatar and then also listening to your inner voice, right? Like Tara has a highly attuned inner voice, right? Very highly attuned, highly kinesthetic.
I have a highly attuned ability to ignore that inner voice too.
Of course.
Well practiced.
Because you're really kinesthetic and sympathetic. You buy the story.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's
Lindy, I would have taken that client. I would have taken her absolutely on. And yeah, I agree. You may just be up against some really, really, really if you knew her environment, for someone who's young, like at 25, has she got roommates or family, or is she living with her family still?
Family, yeah. She's living.
Yeah. Like some stuff like that is almost impossible to overcome. If young people are still living, like young adults still living with their family, that to me is a really, really difficult situation for them to overcome. Even if the family's wonderful, like even if the family is like a healthy, wonderful family, encouraging them, it's still the structure of like, you're 25 and you're still living as a child in your parents' home, because you can't live as an adult in your parents' home. You can only live as a child in your parents' home, right? And so some of the problems, the environment is not conducive to being able to get through these problems. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm starting to learn is like, not that I wouldn't take them on, but maybe sort of recognize that there's some stuff that you will have to just get the person to accept that this is something you're going to work on later, that you can give them all the building blocks to be able to, once they become independent, to be able to, then that'll be the time to work on some of the other things, because they're too stuck in a like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. My experience is that that's really, really hard to try and get that age to shift it. Whereas the 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds that I've worked with who are living out on their own are like fabulous to work with, because they're just so invested in their own change, and they're becoming independent, and they're like in this momentum of change, right? Whereas it's like, it's so counterintuitive to be stepping into your independent self when you're still living in that environment of being at home. And I think Alan and I both have really worked with that's probably been the hardest demographic for me to get real change with. But I've also been doing this long enough now where I have people who are like, I talk to them 3 or 4 years later, and they're like, yeah, you know what? While I was there, it wasn't going to go anywhere. But as soon as I moved out, then I was able to deal with it. Then I was able to work on it, and they really have gotten that positive change, and credit it back. I would say that, I know you want to say something else. Lindy, I would also say with this young woman, chances are she's going to notice a lot of this over time. So you may be in a position now where you want to say something like, do a couple, like really do a session where you're really focused on the future. Just say, for the time being, just we're going to focus on the future, forget about the things that are, in the past or still currently, and get her really focused on the future and what she is capable of doing. And then take a break. Say, let's take 2 or 3 weeks. And I would, chances are after 2 or 3 weeks, she'll come back and a bunch of things will have changed for the positive that she just didn't have the space to notice until then. And then whatever is left, you can work on that, but you're not banging your head against the wall trying to change things that are already effectively changed. But she's like, it just, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, because this, if I may just share one thing, like at that age too, it's like they think they're gonna go and never get angry again, and never, meanwhile, there was things that she did do differently, and did notice, but didn't take any stock in that. It's like, but I did these 3 other things, and I think I'm gonna be the first person Lindy's not gonna be able to help, and the NLP work, I'm gonna be a first failed client, like just this, so it's like, and obviously that's not reality, but it's just, I guess I just want to know, I think what you said is valid, because maybe it's the time, because I do sense that is something for these young people. Yeah.
There's also, by the way, I have a client, I have to share this. I have a client that I legitimately did not feel fantastic about. Like I knew she came to me, she was referred, I'd worked with her sister, she came, her sister had big results, I worked with her, and I really felt a little bad, because I felt like, oh, she was, her sister had this big giant, like life-changing, stuff happen with me, and she's just kind of like sort of getting results, but not, not great one. Like, I don't know, I didn't feel great about it. But I also knew she was a little poker faced, and she was pretty negative by nature. And I have since, I finished with her. I did my second last check-in. I'll still do one more. Her ZTPI had completely changed, and I was blown away. I was like, what? This is not what I would have thought was happening based on the way she's like, because when I see her, she'd be like, well, I'm still fighting with my husband. I'm still, all this stuff. And then this week alone, I've gotten like 3 referrals from her. And the one woman that I've got some woman from LA that I'm starting to work with now. And she's like, I think she's referred everybody in the entire office to you. She's like, she won't stop talking about like just how amazing it was. And she thinks that everybody needs to come see, like, it's just, and I'm like, what? This is this woman that was like really negative and kind of like really, I lost some sleep over her, just being like, I don't know why I can't help her. So you never really know. People are weird. People are just so weird.
Geez, that's an attestation to, boy, we like our clients. They're weird.
People are weird, not my clients, just people. Y'all are weird too.
I think Tara's point that adult children living at home can only be children. They can't be adults. I have 2 clients, trauma females, both in their early 20s. One lives on her own, self-determining. The other lives at home. And behind closed doors, she blames her parents for her trauma. And then when they signed with me, they say, do you guarantee your work? I say, yeah, our trauma protocol guarantee it. So we got to a point in the process where she wanted to exit the process. So she exited the process. She didn't finish the process. And then she got her mother to text me to ask for a refund because the process didn't work. And I said to the mother, first, your daughter's an adult. I can't talk to you about it without her written permission. So I got written permission. And then I said, well, the fact that you're calling me on behalf of your 24-year-old daughter is indicative of the problem. She's an adult. And she said, I know, but you guaranteed your process. And I said, okay, let's talk about that. And I went through every step of the process. We cleared 4 traumas that went from SUDS 9 or 10 to 0. We took a pain threshold from 8 to 1. She had lost her voice one time in an argument. We gave her her voice back. Her cards all showed improvement. I said, so the process worked. Your daughter exited the process. And so the woman said, so you're not standing behind your guarantee. So now you're actually hearing the problem, right? The problem's coming from the mother. They're not responsible for anything. The world, they're at total effect all the time of the world. So the daughter's living under the mother's auspices, says she wants to get over her trauma, but then doesn't take ownership of it. And so, yeah, those clients come. And you know what I had to do, because I got rocked. I don't like clients who don't finish their process. I don't like clients who don't test negative for PTSD. I don't like when I fail like that. And I had to look at it. I had to go through every step of the process and reaffirm that every step was done as well as I could, and every step worked, right? And that's a client probably who, at the end of the day, has more invested in her identity as in her problem. And when we got close to letting that go, as Joe Dispenza would say, the fear of the unknown overwhelmed the fear of being where she is. Yeah. Right? She didn't know what was next. I'm going to get off the call. I'm going to pack up and make my way towards home, Tara. You have control.
Okay, Tanya had a question. Yeah, guys, please don't feel like we won't be offended if you have to get off. But Tanya has a question. You won't know. Hi, Tanya.
So I have a question about a client. I'm going to preface this question by what I did, and then I'd love your feedback and insight. So she sent me a text, and which I will read in a second. But what I did with this text was, let's get on a call. We actually hopped on video and we did a core transformation. So I'm just going to read this because this is not something that I'd come across in any of your guys's sharings about any clients. So I just want to see. So her quote is, so crying like a lot and process, this is after step 4. So crying like a lot and processing things that I don't understand, shifts in spiritual priorities, etc. Is this normal with this kind of work? Then she kind of blames the moon for a minute, and then she says, it's been beautiful, but also emotional. So core transformation on the part of her, I asked her to ask her unconscious mind if it felt it was necessary to have this type of response to have change. And she said, yes. So we did a core transformation on that. Just wondering about any other.
You did a core transformation on the part that felt it was necessary. Sorry, what did you do the core transformation on?
Yeah, the part of her that believed it was necessary to have this type of like emotional processing for the work to be effective, essentially.
Oh, fascinating. Cool. Nice. Nice.
The shift in the
great.
core transformation was quite profound. Like she was quite sobby at the beginning, but afterwards she was.
Just before you answer, Tara, did she have lots of significant emotional events in her youth or adverse childhood events unresolved?
Sorry, I woke up from general anesthetic a few hours ago, so I'm not super thinky right now. That's why I read it. I was like, I just got to read this. I mean, we spent 4 hours on step 3.
Okay, so she had a lot of stuff. Here's the thing. How old is she?
33.
Yeah. For a lot of people, if you go back to fundamentals, your unconscious mind represses unresolved events with negative emotions, and it represents them when it's time to heal. We often find clients who let go of a lot of stuff have never allowed the grieving process or to be sad. If you haven't allowed yourself to grieve and now you clear a bunch of things, and Tara can speak to this at greater length and greater depth, but when you do that, often you enter a period where you just have to grieve, where you have to let go. And it's very cathartic. to not grieve, to not be sad when events that should have been created sadness or grief are repressed and not resolved is not good. So to let it go and to cry about them, but then move on. So I think what you're looking for now is the opportunity to move forward. And Tara's going to jump in. I am going to sign off, guys, because I have to get out of here. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Get home, T.
Kids are still awake. Yeah, they're still awake. So I'll have at it.
Okay.
Okay. Tanya, so I agree with what Al was just saying. So in terms of, as long as the pattern is different, it's good. So if somebody hasn't released a lot, absolutely perfect, and it's